In the year 1177, the holy city of Jerusalem rose majestically from the desert, guarded by Crusader knights whose banners flew proudly over ancient stones. On this fateful day, a lone soldier burst through the narrow streets, past pilgrims and worshippers from across Christendom, bearing grave tidings to the ruler of Jerusalem, King Baldwin IV, a 16-year-old youth slowly consumed by leprosy. The Ayyubid dynasty had assembled an enormous army and invaded the Christian kingdom, headed straight for the holy city. Leading this host was the nightmare of all Crusaders, the brilliant Sultan Saladin, whose very name struck fear into Christian hearts. A large Crusader expedition from Europe was in the kingdom, led by Philip of Alsace, Count of Flanders. But Philip was preoccupied with northern Syrian campaigns, leaving only a few knights in Jerusalem's defense. Saladin seized this opportunity, bringing his vast Egyptian army into the Kingdom of Jerusalem in October, encountering almost no resistance in the southern territories. Jerusalem's young king suffered from leprosy, and though his illness showed few physical signs, the lords and clergy knew he was unlikely to live long. Yet Baldwin showed no fear. Learning of Saladin's advance, he left Jerusalem with only 375 knights to defend the coastal fortress of Ascalon. At Ascalon, he issued the Aryier ban, obliging every able-bodied man to military service. This ancient rite was rarely enforced, revealing the desperation of their situation. Knowing Crusader forces were reduced to almost nothing, Saladin moved leisurely up the Palestinian coast, his army ravaging farmlands, burning villages, and collecting booty. At Gaza fortress, Grand Master Odo gathered his Knights Templar, but Saladin bypassed them entirely, pressing toward Ascalon. Baldwin led his few remaining troops to face the approaching storm. Among his commanders was Raynald de Chatillon, Lord of Ultra-Jourdain, recently released after 16 years of Aleppo captivity. Due to Baldwin's deteriorating condition, Raynald would physically lead the Frankish forces. When Saladin's massive army appeared, Raynald realized they were hopelessly outnumbered and withdrew into Ascalon's walls. Saladin, seeing the pitiful royal army, considered it no threat and decided to march straight on Jerusalem, confident in his overwhelming superiority. As Saladin's troops scattered to plunder the fertile coastal regions, they captured men hurrying to join Baldwin in obedience to the Aryier ban, strapping them to camels destined for slavery. The Sultan's forces raided Ramla, Lydda, Mirabel, and countless settlements. Jerusalem hadn't faced such threat for decades. Its crumbling walls needed repair, while the terrified population sought refuge in the Tower of David. But Saladin made a critical error. In overconfidence, he left no one to guard Ascalon or watch Baldwin's movements. Historian Bernard Hamilton called this an elementary lack of caution that would prove catastrophic. Baldwin left Ascalon, bringing his small army to Gaza, where the Knights Templar joined them. On November 25th, they tracked down Saladin's main force at Montgisard Hill, known to Arabs as Tel Jazar. Saladin's army was widely dispersed, scattered in small groups pillaging surrounding lands. When he realized Christians were approaching, he could only recall soldiers within earshot of his war horns, losing his crucial numerical advantage. His force still outnumbered the Franks, whose army consisted of 375 knights and a few thousand infantry. The Muslim forces failed to realize they'd been maneuvered onto swampy ground where superior numbers worked against them. This tactical positioning was likely Balian of Ibilin's work, whose local terrain knowledge proved invaluable. As Baldwin's army gazed upon Saladin's forces, the young king summoned the Bishop of Bethlehem to ride forward. The Crusaders carried their most precious relic, fragments of the true cross, believed to be wood from Christ's crucifixion cross. King Baldwin, his teenage body already ravaged by aggressive leprosy, was helped from his horse. Despite pain and weakness, he dropped to his knees before the holy relic, raising trembling hands toward heaven, praying for victory over Christ's enemies. When Baldwin rose, his men erupted in cheers, deeply moved by their afflicted king's courage. Here was a youth who should have been enjoying court life, instead leading them into seemingly certain death, his faith unwavering despite consuming agony. Baldwin positioned himself with Reynald's Knights and Templars in the center. Though numerically inferior, they prepared the classic Crusader tactic, a full-frontal, heavy-armored cavalry charge aimed at Saladin's hastily formed battle lines. The moment came like divine thunder. Christian knights spurred their war horses forward, lowering lances as they built to thunderous gallop across muddy ground. The impact was immediate and devastating. Like a steel wedge driven by God's hand, they smashed into Saladin's formation center, immediately inflicting terrible casualties and breaking the enemy line. Saladin's troops spread over too large an area, were caught completely off guard. The Sultan was still organizing scattered forces into defensive blocks when Reynald surprised him with unexpected charge. Normally, Muslim commanders would allow Crusader cavalry to charge, then maneuver troops aside and surround the knights once momentum was spent. But Saladin had no time for this proven tactic. His army lost all formation as panic spread. The Crusader charge caught them at the worst moment, with Christian knights among them dealing death with sword and mace. The pursuit began immediately, Baldwin's men chasing fleeing enemies across the battlefield. One of Saladin's great-aunt-and-nephews fell in the melee, and the Sultan himself nearly died. Only by mounting a swift racing camel and fleeing with the handful of companions did great Saladin escape disaster. Christians pursued broken Muslim forces relentlessly, killing or capturing many while seizing enormous treasure and supplies. Muslim troops who had wandered off to plunder found themselves easily captured when attempting to return. The pursuit continued deep into night, hundreds more of Saladin's soldiers falling into Christian hands. Baldwin pursued the remnants until darkness made further chase impossible, then retired triumphant to Ascalon. For 10 days, heavy rains deluged the region, while Saladin, having lost his army and his personal Mamluk bodyguard, fled toward Egypt. Bedouin raiders harassed his retreat. Of the massive force that invaded with such confidence, only 1/10 returned to Egypt. The victory at Montgisard became legendary throughout Christendom. A 16-year-old leper king with barely 400 knights had defeated the most feared Muslim commander of his age. While Baldwin remained on the throne despite his progressing disease, the kingdom lost no territory and flourished. But ruling was surely unbearable burden for the young Baldwin, as leprosy slowly claimed his body. His story remains tragic, a truly great leader whose potential was cut short by cruel fate. We can only imagine what the Kingdom of Jerusalem might have achieved if Baldwin IV had been blessed with full, healthy life. But for one shining moment at Montgisard, the Leper King showed that faith, courage, and tactical brilliance could overcome impossible odds. It was when a dying boy defeated Islam's greatest general.